Amen to that. Thank you. So good to be with you. What a great day we had together. I've enjoyed it immensely. What a great potluck we had today. You know, I've been to lots and lots of potlucks across this nation. I think the churches of Christ are known for all their good potlucks. I tell you, we preachers reveal that, of course, in the way that we gain this weight. There was a grade school teacher that had her kids say to bring a show and tell. Show us something about your religion. A little boy came in and he held up the Star of David. He said, I'm from a Jewish family, and this is the Star of David. It represents our Jewish faith. Next little boy said, I'm from a Catholic family, and this is a crucifix, and this represents our faith. And the third little boy got up and he said, I'm with the Church of Christ, and this is a casserole. And that pretty much represents who we are, because we enjoy our potlucks, and I enjoyed that one today. I want to talk to you tonight about the difficulties of life, and we're going to begin by reading from James. James is the brother of our Lord Jesus. And I dropped my glasses down here. No problem. Thank you. James chapter 1, let's look at verses 2, 3, and 4. Might as well just stay down here. Is that all right? If I feel so pontific standing up so high. Listen to James. James chapter 1, verses 2, 3, and 4. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. That's an amazing statement that James has made. It's amazing teaching, that we need to have joy in trials. And that's a little surprising, isn't it? And sometimes, you know, people misunderstand what James is saying, and they think, well, we ought to find humor in times of suffering. That's not really what he's saying. It's sort of like the fellow that was in the hospital, and he was fighting some disease, and he was in and out of a coma. And he'd come out of the coma and was able to talk with the doctors, and then he'd fall back in the coma. He woke up one day, and his wife was sitting in the chair across the room. He motioned for her to come over close to the bed. And he said, dear, you know, when I was laid off from my job, you were there. You've been there through all the tough times in my life. When we started our own business after that, and then it folded, you were there by my side. When we lost our home, you were there with me. And you know what? And she leaned over and said, what, dear? He said, I think you're bad luck. Well, that's one way to find joy in trials, but that's not what James is talking about. It's not finding humor, even though you're suffering at the time. Let's define some terms here. That first word, consider it. Consider. That's from two Greek words that are brought together, and it has to do with the attitude, or really the perception you have about things. The Greek word literally means to go before or to lead the way. And what James is saying is that joy should lead the way in the way we view our trials, in the way that we respond to our trials. That's the way we need to consider trials. Let joy lead our response to them. Now, he's not saying that's something easy. He's not saying that that's a natural way of responding to trials. What he's saying, it's a decision that you can make to take joy in the occasion of a trial. Now, what does that word joy mean? Joy means different things to different people, doesn't it? To me, what makes me happy is, you know, playing golf or watching a John Wayne movie. I'm working on trying to fix it so I can watch a John Wayne movie while I'm playing golf. That would be the greatest happiness that I could have. You have your own list of things that make you happy. But that's not really the kind of joy that James is talking about. There's two kinds of joy. There's the kind of joy that we have in the world, and then there's the kind of joy that Jesus brings to our life. Here's a statement that Jesus made to the disciples in John chapter 15 and verse 11. He said, "These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be made full." Now that's an amazing statement too, isn't it? Jesus said, what I've been telling you, what I've been speaking to you, the words that I give you, they will impart my joy to you, and your joy will be made full or complete. That's so different than the world's joy. Jesus came from heaven to bring joy, but not the kind of worldly joy. We already have that, don't we? He didn't have to bring us that. It's something unique. It's something entirely different. It comes to us from the words of Jesus. You see, Jesus has some insight. He knows some things that he brings from heaven that he enlightens us about so that we can rejoice with him when we understand it. It's not like the world's joy. The world takes joy in stuff, don't they? We all do. We like things. Nothing wrong with having things. We talked about that in the class this morning. Nothing wrong with having money and stuff. But that's not what brings us true joy. I love watching commercials because they promote all of that, don't they? That you can't be happy unless you buy our product. Oh my. You can't just have any old car. You've got to have this name brand car. You can't have any old pair of jeans. You've got to have this name brand pair of jeans. You remember the old mouthwash commercials? I love those. And the wife and husband wake up in the morning and the wife wants to kiss the husband. He said, "Oh, no, I've got bad breath." And he runs into the bathroom and you hear this gargle, gargle, gargle. Then he comes out and kisses her. You got to have mouthwash, see, to make that work. And not just any mouthwash, because some mouthwash gives you medicine-y breath, doesn't it? I don't think marriages would have survived without fresh, minty scope. We got to have that. Everything in happiness is wrapped up in stuff that we have. What happens when you lose that stuff? If that's what brings you joy, then when you lose it, your joy is taken away from you. You're robbed of your joy. And I'm amazed at some of the news programs whenever we have a tornado that blows through, or we have some other disaster. People are just crying, our life is ruined, our life is gone, because everything has been blown away. If that's where your joy is, you will be robbed of it when it's removed from you. But Jesus said, I came to bring you genuine joy. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and your joy may be made full. There's insight that Jesus gives us that brings us everlasting joy. We would not have known what God has in mind for us without Jesus revealing that to us. He came to tell us what God is after. He wants to bring many sons to glory. He wants us in heaven with him for eternity. Jesus reveals all of that. Remember this statement: the future of a Christian dispels the sorrow of the moment. That's genuine joy. The joy that Jesus himself possessed. The world did not give Jesus his joy. Nothing that the world did to him could ever rob him of his joy. And that's the joy that James, the Lord's half-brother, is talking about here. Consider it joy, he says. when you encounter various trials. That word trials, we have to define that. It's a word in the Greek that can be translated in English by the word trial or the word temptation. Isn't that interesting? The one Greek word can be translated into English by either concept. But those two words in English, trial and temptation, are totally different, aren't they? A temptation, well, that's a solicitation to sin, isn't it? That's an invitation to do something against the will of God, to bring you into a sinful relationship with God. That's what temptation is all about. It appeals to your lust, your desires, and it wants you to sin. But a trial, well, that's just a test, isn't it? It's a test of who you are. It's a test of genuineness. And we recognize that God indeed tests our faith. He certainly did Abraham, didn't he? And he will test our faith as well. Are you the kind of person that God is looking for to live with him for eternity? That's the test. Are you genuine? That's the test. Now, in any circumstance in life, you can have both a temptation and a trial in the very same set of circumstances, which is an interesting thing. How is that possible that it could either be a trial or a temptation in the same event in your life? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I want to tell you about Job. You know Job, don't you? The story of Job. He was the richest man in the East. He had 7 sons and he had 3 daughters. He had a great family, didn't he? You know, he had a flock of sheep that numbered 7,000. Even by today's standards, that would be a lot of sheep, wouldn't it? He had 3,000 camels. What does a man need with 3,000 camels? It's an ancient mode of transportation, so I guess old Job had the very first used camel lot. He was into Camelot before King Arthur was into Camelot, I think. But he had 3,000 camels. He had 500 oxen. He had 500 female donkeys. And the Bible said he had very many servants. Here's the Bill Gates of the ancient East. Job was a rich man. One day Satan comes to God. God says, "Where you been, Job?" "Oh, I've been roaming around on the earth." "Oh, yeah, we know what he's up to. He's creating havoc, wasn't he?" That's Satan's business. God says, "I'm proud of my servant Job. Have you considered Job? Look at Job. He's genuine through and through." And old Satan said, "Oh, he serves you because you give him all that stuff. Take his camels away. He'll turn his back on you. He'll curse you to your face." God let Satan have his way with Job, but he said, "Don't kill him. You can touch him, but don't kill him." Satan took his family. Satan took his wealth. And then finally he took his health, didn't he? And you have this picture in the book of Job of this poor man covered with sores, and he only gets comfort by scraping with broken pottery those sores and finding a pile of ashes to sit on. Pretty miserable, isn't he? But he never turned his back on God. No matter how bad it got for him, he never gave up on God. God proved the genuineness of Job. But in the same events, Satan is working on him with temptation. In the same events, God is working on him, testing his faith, proving his genuineness. In all of the trials that we have in life, all of the suffering, it can either be a temptation or a test, depending on the way that we respond to it. And so James says, you consider it an occasion of joy when you encounter various trials. That word encounter is a word that means to fall, or literally to fall on or fall in on. And it means that stuff is going to fall on you. These are things that you don't go looking for, they come looking for you. He's talking about the bumps that we hit in life as we journey through life. You're going to encounter, they're going to fall in on you every once in a while. Be ready for them. He also says they are various, and that word in the Greek just means multicolored. They come to us in all shapes and sizes and in all colors. They can be bright and rosy like the day of prosperity. That can be a temptation, a trial, a test of your faith. They can be as dark black as the day when a loved one departs. Or they can be as dingy gray as when life falls upon you. They come to us in many colors. We encounter them. There's a variety of them. And so James is saying, you let joy lead the way in your response when you encounter the many-colored trials of life that come your way. Now in verses 3 and 4, he gives us 3 reasons why we can consider it an occasion of joy. Here's reason number 1. You know it's a test, knowing that the testing of your faith. Now when I was a kid in school, we thought tests were a big negative. Oh no, another test? We got to study for another test? But in reality, we ought to consider tests as a positive. They are good things because they provide the evidence of what you know. They provide the proof of who you are, what kind of person you are. And God is looking for a certain kind of person to live with Him for eternity. If He wanted just anybody to live with Him, He would have put us all in heaven at the beginning. But He doesn't do that. He puts us on this earth that our faith can be tested so that we can be proven to be genuine. I love to watch the Olympics, don't you? I love them. They're coming up this summer if the coronavirus doesn't hinder us. But I love watching those guys compete. But you know, every one of them have to go through what we call the Olympic trials. You don't get to the Olympics just because you want to go. You have to prove you're the kind of person that they're looking for to represent our country at the Olympics. And so these tests prove your genuineness. You don't get the glory before you have the suffering. Now, I want to try to sort of embellish this by looking at the life of the man named Saul, who became the Apostle Paul. You know, in a sense, we're all signed up to go to the heavenly Olympics, but before we can get there, we have to go through the trials. Are we genuine? Are we the kind of people that God is looking for? You remember that Saul was a persecutor of the church. He met the Lord in a vision on the road to Damascus. And then God had Ananias, this man, come to see Paul. Do you remember Ananias' response? Hey, I don't want to go see that guy. I've heard a lot about him. But the Lord convinces Ananias to go to him. He said to Ananias, go, for he's a chosen instrument of mine. This is Acts chapter 9, verse 15. To bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel. For I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. He's going to appear before potentates, kings, heads of state. But he has to suffer to get there. You know, our Olympians, they perform in arenas where the great leaders of the world are seated. They perform in front of prime ministers, in front of kings and presidents. But the suffering, the testing comes first. This man, Saul, the Apostle Paul, went through so many trials, didn't he? I tell you, they beat him with rods. They hit him with whips that had stone or glass at the end of the whip. to cut the skin when they whipped him. They stoned him. One time they thought they had stoned him to death, and they left him there for dead. Guess what? The next morning, he's back in town preaching the same gospel that he preached the day before. You could not deter this man. The whole world knows of the faith of Paul. Why? Because of the tests that he went through. And now he stands on that middle podium, brandishing that gold medal, the crown of life. He's a winner. You can count it joy when you encounter various trials because you know it's a test. God is testing your faith for genuineness. Here's a second reason you can count trials as a joy. James says it produces endurance. Endurance. That word endurance is from two Greek words that come together, and it literally means to remain under. And the idea is that you are under stress. Pressure is being put upon you. And when you're under that kind of stress, you can easily just throw up your hands and say, I quit, or just blow up and make a mess of things. But instead, endurance, sometimes it's translated perseverance, sometimes it's translated patience. You're patient. You remain under those difficult and stressful circumstances in which you find yourself. You never get discouraged. You never get despondent. You never think about quitting. You just remain under, and you are producing patience, perseverance, endurance. One man said, I pray for patience, but all I ever get is trouble. Well, that's right, because it's the trouble that makes the patience, isn't it? My mother, when I was a kid, said, son, you're trying my patience. I didn't know I was doing the Lord's work. The Lord was training her, producing endurance with her through me. And so the Lord may give you a naughty child. He may give you an aggravating boss, an irritable co-worker, because He's testing you, and He's training you, and He's producing something within you that you desperately need to make it across the finish line in heaven. Endurance. When I watch the Olympics, I love watching the marathon. And that may be because when I was in high school, I ran long distance. I was never good at it. I'm not saying that. But 3 or 4 days a week, I'd have to run 10 miles cross country, training for running the mile in track meets. But I was really in the track program because my football coach made me go to track to stay in shape for football. But I love the marathon. It's an endurance race, over 26 miles. Everyone that starts that race, well, not everyone finishes that race, do they? Why? What's the difference? They don't have the endurance. You're not going to make it to heaven if you don't have the endurance. So you can count it joy when you have trials, when you suffer in life. You know it's a test of your faith. God is working to prove your genuineness, but He's also training you to produce what you need for that long haul to eternity, endurance. Thirdly, James says here in verse 4 that trials make us complete, so that you may let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect, complete, lacking in nothing. That word perfect does not mean sinless. It literally means to reach its ultimate end or its intended end. It really means to reach a goal. That's what that word actually means. If you fail to reach the goal that God has for you, then you're not complete, are you? You're lacking something. And what you're lacking is that endurance that God is training you to have. You've got to have that, or you're incomplete. When I played high school football, I tell you, it was a hard thing to do. But my coach put above the door as we'd go out the locker room for practice or for a game, it said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I still can see that sign in my mind to this day. It helped us. I tell you, when you look at the scoreboard and man, you're about 100 points down, you get a little discouraged. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. It saw us through a lot of games and through every workout. We were complete only when we had that keep on keeping on attitude, no matter what. Like the Apostle Paul, you could throw anything at him, but no matter what you threw, he was never going to get discouraged. He was never going to quit. And that's what we have to be, complete, to make the trip to eternity. Count it joy. Count it joy when you encounter various trials. It's a test. God is testing your faith. It produces endurance, perseverance. You got to have that. It makes you complete for the whole trip, all the way to eternity. Those 3 points that James is making here helps us to react, to respond by letting joy lead the way in the way we deal with our trials in life. Sometimes I let trials get to me. Do you do that? I tell you, it really irks me when I exhibit that kind of weakness. Sometimes I whine a little bit. We got a preacher in Durango now. He took my place, and he has this saying. He said, Orbison, would you like some cheese with that whine? That's when I punch him in the face. Well, that's John Wayne talking. That's immature, isn't it? He's helping me, though. And you help me if you say, oh, Guy, you've got it rough, but joy, joy. But Brother Orbison, you don't understand how terrible life can be for me. My house burned to the ground. What then? Well, James would say, joy. That's how you respond. Joy. Yeah, but my brand new car, it got smashed up. What then? Joy. Yeah, but I had to go to the hospital. I had this corona thing. What joy? Yeah, but the stock market, it's going berserk. I'm losing all of my retirement. What then? Joy. Yeah, but what? Joy. Yeah, but joy. Joy. Maybe you'll remember that joy should lead the way when we respond to the tough trials that come our way in life. The way you respond reveals something about you. It determines something about you. A man quits coming to church. An elder goes to visit him. Oh, Brother Smith, we haven't seen you for 2 weeks. Are you sick? No, I'm not sick. What's the matter? I'm upset. What are you upset about? Well, I came in with my work clothes on, and the old lady down there said, you aren't dressed right for church. I'll never go back and darken the doors of that church again. Can you imagine? You'd give up the race for that? You'd throw up your hands and quit eternity for that? What do you think would happen to that kind of a fella if they picked up rocks and said, we're going to stone you because you preach Christ or you stand for Christ, I tell you, that man would turn his back and denounce Christ in a New York minute. He's not genuine. He just doesn't have what it takes for the long haul. How about you? How about you? Life can get pretty rough at times. Have you been thinking that maybe you've been slipping a little spiritually? As you look back on your life, you see, well, I'm just not as active as I used to be. I'm just not as interested as I once was. Have you gotten discouraged? Have you become apathetic? Maybe you're letting the trials of life dictate to you, and they're causing you to drift away. We're going to sing a song that Glenn has announced in just a moment. And if you're not where you ought to be in your relationship with the Lord, why would you leave the building tonight without taking care of that and doing what you know the Lord wants you to do? You can muster the courage, I believe, to do the right thing. When the going gets tough, it's the tough that get going. If you need to respond to the gospel tonight, we invite you to do so. We'll be here to help in any way that we can. While we stand and sing, you can come to the front if you need to.